Today we're kind of switching gears. We're going to start a new series today called Not Dory. Dave, come on. Box of rocks. No, Forgetful. Because Dory was somewhat forgetful, wasn't she? How many of you watched or have seen that whole movie? It's kind of a cool movie. And I want all of you to go out and rent it this afternoon, okay? Because it's part of our series. So I want you all to go watch Dory. But you know, being forgetful, many times it can be something good, really, when you think about it. Because sometimes in life there are some things that we don't necessarily want to remember, do we? When you think about it, you got something in your life, something in your set of experiences that, you know, I would just assume forget all that. So being forgetful in that particular, circumstance would be a good thing. But then again, being forgetful can be a bad thing also. Oh, crap. I forgot where I put my keys. Oh, how many of you have ever rushed across town at 100 miles an hour because you forgot the meeting that you were supposed to be at? Anybody? Huh? Just me? Y'all are liars. Being forgetful, of course, can be a sign of other things. It could be a sign of some, other illnesses or things going on. Being forgetful can be one of those things that's also a challenge for us. Because when we forget things that we should not forget, those things present all kinds of obstacles in our lives, don't they? They really do. Those things present all kinds of obstacles. There was a woman back in Kentucky, in the hills of Kentucky, back in the early 1900s, and she got a new daughter-in-law. How cool was that? All of a sudden, she's got this young girl coming into the family, marries her son, and they built a little cabin next to the other cabin there in the woods, and she was going to teach her how to do some of these things that she needed to worry about, and one of them was laundry. Well, she writes down what this girl needed to do in order to do laundry. This is what she wrote. First of all, you build a fire to heat a kettle of rainwater. Then you get the tubs positioned so they won't blow smoke in your eyes. Then you shave one whole cake of homemade lye soap into the boiling water. Then you sort things and make 3 piles. One for white clothes, one for colored, one for breeches and rags. Next, you rub the dirty spots on the washboard. Then you scrub hard, boil, rinse, starch, and then you take the white things out of the kettle with a broomstick, and you spread the tea towels on the lawn to dry. You hang the old rags on the fence, and you pour the rinse water on the flower bed. Scrub the porch and the kitchen floor with the hot soapy water. You turn the tubs upside down to drain. You go and put on a clean dress, smooth your hair back with side combs, brew a cup of tea, set a spell, rest, and count your blessings. That is what she wrote to her new daughter-in-law. Now, you and I take our laundry, or having a washing machine, if you will, for granted. We forget that many years ago, doing laundry and many of the tasks that we take for granted were very difficult. It's easy to forget things like that. But you know what? In all of the work that they had to do when they were doing laundry back then, there were some tremendous life lessons that they learned. Dedication, hard work. They learned to appreciate things. Think about in your own life. I remember when I was a little kid, I don't really know what the series was as far as when TVs were made and all that kind of stuff, but we had a little black and white job. I'll never forget it. It was in the basement, and we had this big cabinet that had a little teeny black and white screen, and that's what we watched. But look how far things have progressed. So we take things for granted. We forget. We forget how good we have it today compared to where we were yesterday. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey today, and we're going to look into the book of Exodus. And we're going to look at chapter 16 at a few of the things there. I want you to know that, and actually, would somebody here like to read for me? Somebody grab a Bible and go to chapter 16 in Exodus and come on up front. We're going to take a look at the time when the Israelites had been delivered from Egypt. The Israelites were God's chosen people. And the Israelites were wandering through the desert at this particular time. But God had brought them through tremendous turmoil, through horrific times. And you would think that after experiencing hardships like what they had experienced, that they wouldn't so easily forget. But maybe they did. Maybe they were more like Dory. Maybe we're like Dory. Come on up, Karen. If you want to read chapter 16, say the first 5 verses.
The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin. I'm going to have to move this light isn't good enough for me. Which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the 2nd month after they came out of Egypt, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted."
Let's stop right there. Thank you, Karen. Give her a round of applause. See, here's the deal. Is the Israelites had just been delivered from Egypt. God did all kinds of these miraculous, these phenomenal miracles. And what happened was they forgot. They were like Dory. This particular time period that she just read about was about 30 days after they crossed through the Red Sea on dry land. Now you would think that after witnessing all these miracles that God did with all of the plagues and stuff in Egypt, you know, in the night that all the boys, you know, were killed, and the Egyptian army chasing them to the Red Sea, and God parting the ocean, and you would think after all of that they would not forget the fact that God was a God of provision. He was a God that loved them. He was a God that was leading them somewhere. He's a God that was going to care for them, regardless of what the situation was. He proved that. You know, they got the Egyptian army behind them. They got the Red Sea in front of them. And God does the miraculous. But now, 30 days later, they're in the middle of the desert, and they're whining and crying because they're hungry. They're whining and crying because they want some more food. And they start remembering, rather than forgetting the bad stuff, but remembering maybe the life lessons, how God provided for them, but they start remembering back to a time when they were in captivity and that they had all kinds of food to eat. Why did they have food to eat? Because the Egyptians were smart enough to realize if we want them to do this massive amount of labor, they have to have the energy to do it, or they're simply going to die. So they're remembering back at a time when they had food to eat, but they are forgetful about the aspect of their slavery. They were a people that were beaten down. Back then, they were a people that had, they wanted to die. It was so bad. They were being treated so inhumanely, but yet their stomachs were filled. Does it make any sense to any of us that God would do all of these miraculous miracles to deliver these people out of Egypt and to head them toward the promised land, and then to walk away from them in the middle of the desert 30 days later? Does it make any sense at all? And we can sit back here today and look backward at it and say, no, it doesn't make any sense at all. If that was me, I would not have forgotten. I'd have remembered those miracles that God performed. You know, I would have been faithful. I would have known that some way, shape, or fashion, God's going to feed us. You know? No, you wouldn't. You'd have been just like the rest of them, just like me. They were mumbling and grumbling, and they were hungry, and they were talking out of turn. Their stomachs were rumbling. But I want you to notice one thing. They weren't complaining about being thirsty. You see, even in the midst of their hunger, as they're wandering through the desert, God was providing for them. And God was providing water for them. And we can read about how Moses, delivered water from a rock, or God did, I should say. You see, the Israelites were being taken care of, but they're grumbling at this point because they're simply hungry. Are you and I not like the Israelites at times? Do you ever grumble, maybe not outward, but inwardly in your heart about what God is doing in your life, or challenging you with in your life, or allowing life to do to you? Do you ever grumble a little bit? Do you ever wish you had it differently, from a different time of your life, when maybe God was providing in another way, kind of like the Israelites? You see, we are forgetful people. We're like Dory. We forget that tomorrow morning there might be a hangover hanging there after partying all night. Easy to forget. Sometimes we forget how contaminated with guilt we will be after giving in to the temptations of a particular night. Sometimes we forget how empty we were before we actually came to a relationship with Christ. And I know that's difficult to understand sometimes. There was a point in my life when that statement would have meant nothing to me because I didn't really know. But as a believer now, I understand the emptiness that I had experienced before I came to know Christ. Sometimes I forget that, though. The truth is, none of us are ever really totally satisfied, are we? Or are we? Do you feel completely satisfied in every aspect of your life? Do you feel completely cared for and loved and provided for, and have all the opportunities that you need and you want? I mean, do you feel totally content in life? We forget sometimes the things that we do have, the mercies of God that we do have. Back in Kentucky, in the hills, since we're kind of hanging in Kentucky, there's this old store, and it's still there, Canyon Creek. And a story was written about a guy that was traveling through Canyon Creek on his way to somewhere else. He was vacationing or whatever, driving through, and he stopped at this old store to get directions. And he goes in there, and there's an old hound dog in the store, and this dog is just howling away. And the guy goes in, and he says to the storekeeper, says, what's wrong with the dog? And the guy says, well, he's just sitting on a cockle barrel, just sitting on a cockle barrel. And the customer says to him, well, why didn't he just give up? Why didn't he get up and move? The guy says, he just likes to holler, just likes to complain. But you know what? There's some truth to that. Listen to me, in human nature. Sometimes it's easier, maybe it's more enjoyable to grumble, to complain, you know? We forget the good stuff. Murmuring, complaining, being disappointed becomes a way of life at times. And we lash out to God. Why did you let this happen? Why is this going on in my life? Jeez, don't I ever get a break? The Israelites at this point have been provided for in miraculous ways, no doubt. We see one miracle after another in the story of their being removed from Egypt. And here they are 30 days after walking through the Red Sea, and they're out in the desert, and they're grumbling. We wish we were dead. At least back in Egypt, we had food to eat. And you think to yourself, what in the world are you guys doing? Really, it brings up a spiritual issue, if you will. They really were spiritual infants. You see, in our walk with God, don't we grow? I know, don't we change all the time? Are we the same people today that we were 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Are we? I hope not. I know I'm not. Now, I don't have it all figured out. I've told you guys that 100 times. All right, so we're still walking that journey together. But you see, back then, the Israelites were spiritual infants. They were forgetful of all of the wonderful blessings and the things that God had given to them all the time. How very important it is that we remember the provision of God in our life. Not just that he died on the cross and, took care of our sins, but also that God is a God that provides for our every single step through the day. He really does. How in the world do you think you breathe at night when you're sleeping? How in the world do you think you wake up in the morning alive? It really is through the blessings, through the provision of God. You guys know I've been going to school now for the last many years. And man, I can't wait for this to be over. And actually after this class I'm in right now, I have one more left. But about a year or so ago, I was in class and the discussion was around disappointment and just being hard-nosed about things in church. And one of the people I was there with, this other pastor, he was telling a story about an elderly person that was in their congregation. She had been there forever. What are you laughing at? Me? What'd I do now? I'm just kidding. Anyway, he's talking about this lady that was just a very staunch, this is the way it is, this is me, I've always been at this church, and this is what, can you kind of get the picture? And she told him, she said, the world has just gone crazy. And she told him, she said, this is a good time to be dead, Pastor. I'll never forget him telling this story. And he said how sad it is that this poor woman could not see, the forest for the trees type of thing. That the tremendous blessings of God, the tremendous provision of God, and all she could see was everything that was wrong in the world, everything that was wrong in the church, everything that was wrong in life. And she couldn't look past. She was forgetful of the blessings that God has given to all of us. When you look at the history of humankind, there's never been a more safe, secure, affluent people than who we are in the United States today. You know that? You go back and look through history. There's never been a greater time to live. Never. And yet many times we forget that. We forget those kinds of blessings. Instead, we complain. Well, I don't like the hymns they're singing anymore. Really? Well, I don't like this and I don't like that. In the church, we do a good job sometimes of complaining, as opposed to remembering why we're here. Well, I don't know. I don't like those songs. The lighting is too dark. Oh, the lighting is too bright. The music's too loud. Oh, no, it's not. It's too quiet. I can't hear it. However, we do have hearing devices in the back, but I don't like using those. I mean, really. It's easier to grumble sometimes. Oh, there's too many new people there. I'm serious. Sermons are too long. No, they're too short. I'm telling you, if I could give you guys a list, you'd be absolutely amazed. But the point I'm making is that sometimes it's easier for us to look at the negative side of things as opposed to the good side. And the hard part, or the very sad part, is this absent-mindedness of us, or our forgetfulness of these blessings in our life, they spill over into all the aspects of our life, our work life. Well, the boss is a jerk. I'll never get a raise. They're just taking advantage of me. I don't know. I'm not worried about, so what if I'm 5 minutes late? They don't care. And it spills over. It spills over into all the different aspects of our life. School. Oh, the teacher's an idiot. Yeah, this class isn't worth anything. They don't know what they're doing. Teachers are all spoiled anyway, right? Yeah, let's don't go there, right? It spills over into our personal lives. When we look at maybe our spouse and say, well, you don't work as hard as I do. Whoa. Here's a good one. You see, we forget. We forget the blessing side of things. And that's exactly what happened with the nation of Israel as they're walking through the desert only 30 days after leaving Egypt. They just forgot. And we do the same things. You guys ever read the Peanuts cartoon? Well, years ago, this one was written out there. And what Lucy is doing is she's going all through the neighborhood and she's getting people to sign this petition. And like it says here, sign this, please. It absolves me from all blame. Oh, yeah. Sign this. Because I'm not to blame for anything. And sometimes we want to take that approach. We forget that our actions do make the person, that what we believe does come out and is represented in the way we approach things in life. See, we can't just walk away from the things of experience, the lessons that we learn in life. We need to remember, yes, there are negative things in life that we can do without. But we don't ever want to lose the life lesson that goes along with it. Yes, I don't want to remember the surgery, but I do want to remember how God brought me through. What happens when a little child, let's say, becomes, what's the word I want to, yeah, they throw a temper tantrum. You ever seen a temper tantrum? Huh? No? Who said no? So the little one is just going off over there. And sometimes you're like, get over here. I want to straighten you out, mister. You get over here. Let me show you. Let me talk to you a minute. Now, the intention is that you wake them up a little bit, right? You can't be disrespectful like that. You can't you can't talk to me like that. You can't act like this. You need to learn a little something here, you little brat. Right? But it's done in a loving fashion. Back when the Israelites were wandering through the desert at this particular point, they would have seen God from that perspective too. You see, Moses came back to them and said, the Lord has heard your grumbling. The Lord has heard your whining. And the first thought that would have gone through the mind is, oh crap, we're in trouble now. Really. And Moses told them, as you read the rest of that story, and please read that chapter this week if you would, God does provide food for them. As a matter of fact, he provides so much food it makes them sick because he's teaching them a lesson. But they would have expected God to be harsh with them. They would have expected God to be very, very harsh. So here they are, out in the desert, expecting God to just rip them. A young woman went to her pastor one day with a very tragic story about a marriage that was falling apart. Her husband had deserted her and things were not good and things were quite challenging. And she told the pastor about how she had to get a second job to make ends meet. How she had to cut way back on all kinds of things. How she didn't receive child support for several months. And the story was just a very tragic one. The pastor asked her, he said, well, do you still love him? And she says, unfortunately, I do. Now, she had gone there because she wanted to complain to the pastor that after all this that had happened, he called her and said, you know what, I really screwed things up, and I'd like to come back. So she goes to the pastor and she tells him this horrific story. And the pastor says, well, if you still love him and he loves you, why don't you welcome him back with open arms? And she's like, what? That easy? Just let him come back? Where's the justice in that? The pastor told her, he says, I'm not talking about justice. I'm talking about grace and mercy. I'm talking about love in action. Which is exactly what God was doing with the children of Israel at this point. You see, the truth be told, if all we ever got was the justice that we deserved, I doubt we would be here this morning even talking. But it is only through the provisions of God, the blessings of God, all of the things that He has gifted us with, all of the mercy and the grace that He has shown to us, that we can even come together today when you think about it in your life. Think about all the times that God has been there for you. Think about all those heartfelt times where you cried out to God, maybe silently, with issues and things that were very troublesome. And look back and see the provision, the way God handled it. You see, those are the things that we need to not be forgetful about. We need to remember those times where also God provided for us even when we did not deserve it. And instead of getting that which we deserve, what do we get? We get blessed. We get provided for. We expect God to say, get over here so I can tell you something, mister. And instead, we get showered with grace. See, this is the God that we serve, that we have a relationship with. This is the hope that we have, is that this is the absolute character and nature of God. Not one that wants to condemn, but one that wants to love and to bless. One that wants us to grow spiritually. That we need to not be spiritual infants for the rest of our lives, but to continue this growth process. It's how we have an abiding walk, abiding relationship with Christ, is to remember, to not be forgetful. And also to remember that God is not just some genie there to answer our prayers whenever we have an exam and we decide to pray to Him that morning. Dear Lord, get me through this. Statistics is tough. We should never be forgetful. Father, I pray that this morning as we consider this aspect of your grace and mercy in our life, the way that you provide, the way that you allow us to grow so that we can become more and more spiritually mature. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to wrestle with the idea of the things that we forget, as well as the way that we approach things, as well as the things that we do remember, the things we choose to remember, we choose to forget. So, Lord, I just pray that for each one of us today, whatever you want us to walk out of here with is exactly what's in our heart. And it's in the name of Christ that I pray. Amen.